In less than 2 years, Ugandans will head to the polls in an election that many say will decide the country's political future for years to come. Opposition parties in Uganda are preparing for 2021, already casting this as a generational battle. Uganda's longtime president, Yoweri Museveni, will be facing many challenges, including one who was only 4 years old when Museveni took power 33 years ago. Musician and Member of Parliament Robert Kyagulanyi, also known by his stage name Bobi Wine, was recently named as one of Time magazine's 100 young rising stars who are impacting the future of politics, business, and science in the world. Long before he joined politics, Bobi Wine was a musician and community organizer who used his music as a driver and centerpiece in his activism. And this perhaps explains why the Ugandan government has of late barred him from performing to his fans. But that has not stopped him from releasing new music, like his latest song, Kasukali. Currently on tour in North America, where he is meeting Diaspora members of his grassroots people power movement, Bobi Wine tells me that he still uses music to expose social injustice and to mobilize community activism. Bobi Wine, thank you very much for joining. Welcome to the Voice of America.
Thank you very much for having
How are you
me.
doing, man? I think
alive.
the last time, I think a couple of times I've seen you on crutches. When we talked, was it last year? You know, there was a point when you did have crutches. You look healthy to me. You're alive.
I'm good. I'm thankful that I'm still alive.
You have a new song out. I want this conversation to be very much about your music, also about your politics. Because we never really had a chance in all the conversation we've had to talk about your music. What is this new song that you have?
The new song that we have is called Kasukari, literally meaning sugar. But of course, it's a poetic song.
But is there a shortage of sugar in Uganda?
Not that I know of, but again,
there's a deeper metaphor to Kasukali.
There's a deeper, twisted metaphor to it. It's more or less asking the people, is that the speed or is the style all right? Is the mode that we're using effective enough, or do you rather we increase or twist it a little bit?
To mobilize and engage.
That song, we did it to communicate to the people. I mean, in the past, we never used to be taken seriously as ghetto people. We were dismissed as hooligans, as vagabonds. But recently you see that President Museveni and his henchmen are actually picking so much interest in the ghetto because they know that the people of the ghetto have spoken through their child. So
there's been an acknowledgement within the wider society, but also within the politics, that this is a constituency that that matters.
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, is that the way the regime is responding to our cries of exclusion, of oppression, of injustice is laughable. They are President Museveni is descending on the ghetto with stashes of money, bribing everybody that he can get to. It's laughable because I think he thinks being bribed or being bought up is all we want. We just want our life to change. We just want dignity like everybody else. We want inclusion. We want to be acknowledged as human beings.
Now you have a new song out, like we said, Kasukali. We will play it for our listeners too. You have not been able to perform. For how long now?
Now more than 156 shows.
156 shows have been cancelled. What reason does the government give you? But most importantly, how does that affect your career as a musician?
For starters, it affects me as a musician. Music is my career. Music is my profession, and it's my way of life and the way of life of so many people that work with me, and also a way of life of so many people that earn from my music engagements, who are way in their hundreds. So it unemploys and disempowers so many people.
Because there's a whole industry around you as a performer.
Industry around me as a performer. It's a whole livelihood for hundreds of families that are now suffering. However, I don't perform because President Museveni feels pressured, or I speak the truth. I speak too much truth in my music. Initially, the police gave laughable explanations for blocking my music concerts. First, they said I was not working with the police to prepare my concert. Secondly, they said I had not informed the police about my shows. The same thing that I've been doing for more than 10 years.
And you have evidence to show that you have actually done those things.
Exactly. And recently, the police spokesperson came out and said that I had not, provided enough ambulances and security. And lastly, they say that the police manpower was not going to be available because it was independence. However, President Museveni, with his nature of being disconnected, not only with the population, but even with his own police, he came out and gave his justification for blocking me from performing. He said that Mr. Bobi Wine went to America and told the international community about the misrule and the excesses of the government.
So that's punishment.
So for that reason, he's literally trying to punish me for exposing his impunity.
Let me ask you, since that incident in Arua, where you ended up in jail and tortured, I believe, there had been such a reaction from the international community about your story, but also in general how Ugandan police treats protesters. Have you seen any changes since then?
Well, the only change has been the heightening of the oppression. As a person, of course, it in a way guaranteed my staying alive, apart from the brutalization and constant physical and psychological torture. The regime has in a way backed off my life, and that explains why I'm still alive. However, so many people that are not lucky enough to have international and national media attention on them have suffered so much. Some have been abducted and they show up dead or totally tortured. Recently, a fellow musician who goes by the name Bobi Wine was abducted by who we suspect to be security agencies. He went missing for a few days only to show up with his eye plugged out, and he was left there for dead. And he indeed succumbed to his torture wounds and he passed away. Many border riders have been run over by police deliberately. When I was coming from court, and even when a fellow artist was coming back to the country. And the most recent has been the abduction of one lady called Zulaika Narukenge, and she showed up narrating despicable things that were done to her and the attack on her dignity as a woman.
These are all members of People Power?
These are all members of the People Power movement. So there has been a very deliberate attack on the people that
targeting the other individuals that are not very well known.
Sure, exactly.
So I mean, this is what, a year and a half out before the next election in 2021, which you're going to stand. Do you think this gets worse as it gets closer to election time?
Sure. We know that it's going to get worse. President Museveni is known to use violence, and indeed we project that it's going to unleash a lot of violence on the people of Uganda. And that explains why we constantly beseech the international community, the international media, and all friends of Uganda and all friends of humanity to kindly put their focus on the people of Uganda, because we know that injustice flourishes in the darkness. So the more we have the focus of the world on Uganda and the goings on in Uganda, that alone might in a way help to limit the oppressions. But also it has been our request all along to the international community, the organizations that work with Uganda, the governments that work with Uganda, to hold the administration in Uganda accountable and make the observation of the rule of law and human rights a precondition for cooperation.
Part of your precondition as any opposition politician is that there's a level playing field.
Certainly.
Are you confident that as you approach 2021 that the ground, the field is leveled in where you can play. At the end of the day, you say you're confident that this, I either won or lost because I had the backing of the people, and that there was no other external force that was working against or for me.
Yeah, sure. As we speak now, I must say the level is extremely tilted against the people of Uganda, against any dissenting voice, and tilted in favor of the regime, because as we speak now, none of the opposition figures can be allowed to address a gathering or to even be hosted on media in the countryside. You know, I personally, like I said, cannot, I'm the artist who can not practice his profession, because my music is communicating what the president does not want to hear. I cannot be allowed to address my constituents even when I'm a member of parliament. There's following, the police and the military are being used not to maintain security in the country. No, the police is not serving its mandatory role of protecting citizens and their property and keeping law and order, but they're instead being used to crack down on dissent, to crack down on the opposition. Personally, I cannot be able to go anywhere publicly, not even church, without being followed by the police or the military.
You were recently in Nigeria to celebrate the late Fela Kuti, an artist that has been, in many ways, they have compared you to in terms of the messaging, your engagement with the government. What does Fela Kuti mean to you?
Well, Fela is a guy that lived before his time. Fela is an artist that I wish I had met and shaken his hand. But nevertheless, Fela continuously inspires us to stand up against brutal regimes. He lived in times that I could only compare to the times we're living in Uganda. He taught us that music is not for only pleasure, especially where there is injustice. Where there's injustice, like it was in Nigeria in the times of Fela Kuti, like it is in Uganda in our own current times, music is supposed to be used for revolution. And that is one important lesson that I took from Fela and will teach the generations that will come after me.
Do you think you're living before your time?
I'm not living before my time. I'm living in these times, and that's why I try as much as possible to do what I must do in these times.
How do you think history will remember you?
Well, I don't know how history will remember me, but I would love history to remember me as a guy who called wrong, wrong, and called right, right. I want to be remembered as a guy that never sold his soul to injustice.
How are the people of Chadondo that you represent right now, that you've become this more than just an MP representing that constituency? You've become like this figurehead of Ugandan opposition politics, and you have this very powerful grassroots movement. How are you able to execute the duties of the people of Chadondo?
Well, I execute the duties of the people of Chadondo to the extent that I'm capable to. Like I just told you, I'm the member of parliament that is not even allowed to address a gathering in my constituents. However, I don't resign to fate. You know, I always find ways, because I'm a ghetto youth and I'm smart, much more smarter than the dictator. So I know how to go about my way. I know how to connect with my people, majority of which are young people. So somehow, despite the curtailment, despite all the efforts to limit us from doing what we can do, we still are able to do what we can.
So even though they frustrate you, you're still able to function and do your job and meet the needs and the demands of your people. Let's talk about the region. East Africa right now has, as you enter 2021, so many things that are happening, from Kenya to Tanzania to Rwanda to South Sudan, some of the things that are happening in Uganda, including your confrontational engagement with security forces. We've seen that happening in other places, including Tanzania right now. Why do you think that East Africa is kind of lagging behind, say, West Africa, according to some analysts, in terms of political reforms?
Dr. Martin Luther King said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And those words are coming true in our times. Just like Dr. King said, in this time we also get to realize that justice anywhere is actually a beckoning of justice everywhere. Justice and democracy being here in the United States and other well-governed country is more reason for that to overflow to other countries, and that's why this country represent in other countries. And indeed, being neighboring to a dictatorship is very possible to overpower it to another country. You notice that it started in Uganda for the regime to tax social media, and it is spilling across. The operation that started in Uganda is spilling to even a democracy like Tanzania. Dictators, especially in Africa, and indeed the whole world, seem to be reading from the same playbook, which playbook I believe must be destroyed so that nobody, especially in the new generation, reads from that. You know, while many countries are getting better at the observation of human rights and the rule of law, others are actually descending to worse levels. So it is a responsibility of all of us as Africans, as East Africans, as human beings, to observe what is right and to make sure that we look out to our brothers and sisters, even across borders, to make sure that injustice is nipped in the bud whenever it shows it face. A dictatorship, whenever it shows any signs, must be destroyed when it's still a seed, not waiting for it to grow up in an invincible tree. Yeah.
So you've been in North America on your North American tour. You're in Boston, you're in Washington, D.C. right now, you're in Maryland, you're in Toronto. What are Ugandans in the diaspora telling you, and why is it important for you to engage with the diaspora? Is that a constituency that you really, a politician in Uganda should care about?
Yeah, very important for us to engage the diaspora. First and foremost, we must acknowledge the fact that the diaspora has taken our best, owing to the brain drain that has been ongoing not only in Uganda but very many African countries. But in the case of Uganda, so many of our talents and our resourceful people have been drained from Africa because Uganda in particular does not offer them what they deserve.
The environment.
The environment does not favor their dreams. They are first world brains in a third world country, and it's only understandable for them to want to work or to live their lives in communities, in societies, under conditions that dignifies them. So we come to these people because we know these are, one, resourceful Ugandans, but most importantly, that are living in well-governed countries. We believe that what they've learned here can be such a resource to our home. But most importantly, even within our struggle, we know that the regime, the dictatorship back home, only fears the international voice, only fears sanctions, and we have capitalized so much on our diaspora community to push for sanctions, to push for these development partners to hold the administration back home accountable in terms of human rights and the rule of law. I must mention that our diaspora team has done tremendous work that has led to the sanctions against the former police chief Kali Kaihura and a lot of other other officials in Uganda that were involved in human rights abuses. That was so motivational to the people of Uganda, and we wanted to continue. We wouldn't have been able to achieve that minus our diaspora team.
Bobi Wine, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate you, man.
Me. And God bless.
Thank you.